Good evening. I wanted to create a follow-up video to my previous one, which covered the problem with ABA. There was a source that I tried to include in that video, which I had no luck finding, but thanks to some friends of mine and some sources, I was able to track down the writer of the blog in question, which details the abuse that the person suffered in the Kennedy Krieger Institute. The Kennedy Krieger Institute is a school and research center in Maryland specializing in autism, and there's some experiments being done to try to find the causes of autism, very similar to the UC Davis Mind Institute and the Missing Project. I figured this would be great to know about because it is the only evidence I could find of abuse that happened at that center. So I'll be reading some excerpts from the blog post, which is titled "The Dangers of ABA, A Survivor Story Part 1. So that way you'll get to see firsthand what it was like at the center for this person. When I was around 3 years old, I was diagnosed with autism. What came next was a nightmare for me. I was placed in early intervention, which involved applied behavioral analysis, or ABA. ABA is a method used by psychologists, speech pathologists, and some staff in special education settings to try and make autistic and other neurodivergent people pass for neurotypical as much as possible. ABA was developed by O. Ivar Levas, an extremely ableist psychologist. Just how ableist was Levas? He said the following quote from his 1981 book, The Me Book. With responsibility, the developmentally disabled individual takes on dignity and acquires certain basic rights as a person. No one has the right to be taken care of, no matter how retarded he is. So put your child to work. His work is to learn. There you have it, folks. He believed that people should have to learn to conform to the world at the expense of basic human rights and dignity. That's simply not true. Everyone, regardless of disability, race, sexuality, faith, or lack thereof, gender identity, etc., must be given basic rights and human dignity. Levas was also anti-LGBTQ. In the 1970s, he developed LGBTQ conversion therapy with the help of George Reckers, a so-called Christian psychologist, and that's not Christ-like at all, to force someone to conform to the world, especially to get human rights. Yeah, so he really was as conservative as they come, that you have to work for your rights. And yes, seeing how gay conversion therapy still exists in 30 states, as it was banned in 20 of them, including New York and Nevada, it really needs an overhaul. Now I'll be reading what the person went through at Kennedy Krieger itself. Just a warning, it's very graphic and intense, so please be advised. In 2007, my behavior got so out of control that I got expelled from Harbor and had to go to Kennedy Krieger High School in Baltimore, Maryland, where I had to repeat my sophomore year due to my poor academic performance. It's a special education high school that's an hour away from my house. Kennedy Krieger High School is part of the Kennedy Krieger Institute, which is heavily ABA based. The rules were safe hands, calm body, etc. Kennedy Krieger was also a living hell. The school had a level system, with level 1 having the least amount of privileges and level 5 having the most. The privileges were going on school trips, shopping at the school store, going to school dances, eating from the school cafe instead of the nasty cafeteria food, etc. Your level ranking was based on your behavior. The highest I ever got to was level 4, but it still wasn't high enough to go to the trip to the Inner Harbor, which I really wanted to do. I was really disappointed. Kennedy Krieger also uses restraint and seclusion to try and control unwanted behaviors. I'm going to keep saying this over and over again. This never works. I was restrained and put in seclusion many times, and now I have PTSD from those traumatic experiences. I don't remember much about my junior year from 2008 to 2009 because it was pretty much a blur, but my senior year from 2009 to 2010 was possibly the worst year in my life. I once again tried to fit in with everybody else. I started carrying my handbag to school, as well as my backpack, because I wanted to be cool like all the other girls. I tried to fit in with this clique of girls because they were so popular, and I wanted to be like them. But when they didn't accept me, I got very angry. On May 26, 2010, I was angry with the clique, so I wrote some nasty things about them, thinking nobody was watching. I then crumpled up the paper and threw it in the trash. Apparently, a teacher saw it because she referred me to the resource room, which was a room where you were sent if you were behaving inappropriately. Then my counselor came and asked me about the paper, which she apparently got uncrumpled and got out of the trash can. Since I switched schools, I got a new counselor. I was livid that she got the paper out of the trash can, and so I reached towards to try to get the paper from her. She reached back so I couldn't get it, and the next thing I knew, at least 2 resource staff members came and pinned me down to a mat. I was so scared and agitated that I screamed bloody murder. Then the dean of students came, and one of the resource staff said that I was trying to assault my counselor. But I wasn't trying to assault her. I was just trying to get the paper from her. I was trying to hold on to my pair of headphones because I felt secure with them, but one of the resource staff managed to pry it out of my tightly clenched hands. I tried to bite one of the staff to break free from their grip. Later that year, as soon as I got home from school, I went to the kitchen and got a knife. I went to my room and sat on my bed for about 10 minutes, contemplating slitting my wrists. I wanted to die because I felt so horrible about myself. I thought I was evil. What stopped me from doing it was that my mom would freak out if she saw what I have done. I finally graduated from Kennedy Krieger on June 11, 2010. I cried because I was so happy. I was happy that I was free to be whomever I wanted. So what happened to this person was abhorrent, but it is good that they survived the ordeal. It's quite saddening to see how the people at Kennedy Krieger are not even treated like human beings, much like the Judge Rotenberg Center, and they had no privacy whatsoever when they threw out the paper and such. Like, who goes into a garbage can to pull out a crumpled piece of paper, giving the person no sense of agency or privacy, and then trying to tease the person by holding it from them and then blaming the kid for being mad. Like, if you did it to a neurotypical child, it would have been the exact same thing. So why do the standards have to be any different when it comes to autistic people? Because we are humans too, and we deserve the exact same rights. I guess some just don't see it that way. Since we're on the topic of the Kennedy Krieger Institute, I wanted to share with you the perspective of a doctor who works there. Her name is Lady Elizabeth Watchell, and she is the medical director of the neurobehavioral unit at the Kennedy Krieger Institute. I found this blog post, which was posted on the National Council on Severe Autism's page. Now, I do not endorse them at all whatsoever, but I think it's important to at least share a little bit of a perspective from this person and comment on it. Just a warning that the upcoming excerpt is also graphic and disturbing, so please be advised. This is what Dr. Watchell had to say. The New York Times published the 2020 party line, "We only learn and grow from autism," and a pox upon anyone who suggests that some aspects of autism are not laudable. I am not an autism parent, but I have led for the past 17 years an inpatient hospital service given over to autism and other developmental disorders. I would agree 110% that autistic children and their families are very special, and I readily confirm that their contributions to our world are spectacular. But I also bear witness to the brutal truth of the profound psychiatric, behavioral, cognitive, and medical challenges that afflict some individuals with autism. And yes, afflict is the correct word, because when an autistic child has permanently blinded himself from self-injury, broken his teacher's arm, or swallowed multiple toothbrushes and required emergency surgery, there is nothing perfect or magnificent about it, and it must be remedied. One of the mothers writing in the New York Times readily recognized that her autistic son's seizures were problematic rather than perfect and sought treatment. If you don't believe me that many autistic children need and deserve treatment and related care, ask the mother who wanted a professionally painted scleral shell for Mother's Day so her daughter wouldn't appear so disfigured after losing an eye to self-injury. Or the mother who lay in an ICU bed and held her dying autistic son after a brutal beating in a totally inappropriate setting. Children with autism will spend far more years as adults with autism, and the needs of some of those individuals will remain at very high levels of intensity across the lifespan. Those citizens and their families merit just as much attention and care as the autistic youngsters at the other end of the spectrum, who typically have fewer cognitive, psychiatric, and behavioral comorbidities, and may very well be capable of using their unique autistic mind as a superpower to solve Fermat's last theorem or win a Nobel Prize. This is a crucial matter of public policy in our country, and we cannot afford to cater solely to one group's agenda. Sadly, American society has recently deteriorated into a cataclysmic cancel culture where anyone who dares to voice an alternate opinion, particularly one that is unpopular, points out fragilities or challenges the party line, is publicly shamed and ridiculed and erased from the agenda. This is blatantly apparent in the world of autism and developmental disability, where if it isn't a perfect or magnificent gift, we don't want to hear about it and certainly don't want to address it or consider change, even when lives are at stake. While we haven't yet exiled the autism dissenters to the gulag, the consequences of cancellation have banished the honest needs and plight of some of the figurative taiga, leaving the most vulnerable in precarious positions. Now, some things we gotta talk about a little bit here. First of all, I don't think anyone is disputing the treatment of seizures. I cannot find one autistic person who doesn't want their seizures treated. And if you can find me someone who doesn't want it treated, then please tell me, because I feel like they don't exist. Seizures suck, and we don't want that. But very few studies are being done about it, at least in the long term. So we haven't really come to a conclusion to treat those yet. And besides, most of the studies that we see are in finding the causes, which is not going to treat seizures. It's just going to keep autistic people from existing, or at least presenting autistic. So it's kind of hard to not be a little bit upset by that, because we are a people, we're a neurotype, we're a group. We can't just let our people just not exist. We need to be in charge of what happens to us. And also, why is the person breaking the teacher's arm? Surely there must have been a cause. A running theme in this story is they're not really addressing why these things are occurring, like swallowing toothbrushes or breaking arms or whatever. It's just saying these things happen. But why does it happen? You're a doctor. Shouldn't you be looking into that? Why aren't you writing about that? Is it perhaps that you're not saying so because then addressing that would give them humanity, perhaps? Now, I will agree with Dr. Watchell here that all of these things are certainly not pleasant. I don't think anybody's disputing that, especially with the girl who lost her eye. Like, of course that's bad, that's painful, but no girl would just take her eye out just because she felt like it. There are reasons why those things happen. Nobody just mutilates themselves out of their own amusement, or at least that I'm aware of. So they need to be finding out why they're doing these things. There has to be some kind of medical issue that's not being addressed, or perhaps issues that are happening to the routine, or abuse, and they don't know how to communicate it. But if you're a doctor, why aren't you getting to the bottom of these things? Also, I feel really bad for the dying autistic son. I can empathize with the mother there of her having to watch him die, of course. But the way she writes it makes it seem like she's blaming the child for being beaten to death. It's not the child's fault. Like, that person was beaten by a criminal. That criminal needs to be charged like any other criminal who does a similar crime. The Disability Day of Mourning Vigil acknowledges that. Also, you say that it's a totally inappropriate setting. There's no appropriate setting to beat someone to death, disabled or not. I don't know what makes that appropriate in any manner. And the part with catering to one group's agenda and talking about cancel culture, that is basically a dog whistle for right-wingers, as far as I can tell. And it seems that they just simply do not want us to lead in public policy in terms of what happens to our own group. That's a bit of a problem. It's kind of like telling black people that only whites should be allowed in deciding what happens to their lives. It's kind of a double standard. For those of us who are capable of enacting public policy and influencing it, that power should be given to us, because we want what's best for our entire group, not just for the low support needs people. There are many self-advocates who are self-injurious and have been institutionalized, and they're pissed off and they want justice for the abuse that was done to them. So it's a wide range, the spectrum that encompasses the groups of people who want to enact social change, the social change that groups like the National Council on Severe Autism seem to be trying to prevent us from doing. They want to, it seems, monopolize public policy in terms of how their children are treated. We kind of want the same things, but the difference is that we want them to be able to have their civil rights acknowledged. We want autistic people to have 100% control in how their lives are managed. And that goes for those who are intellectually disabled. If they choose to live their day doing the same routine, like taking a hike or watching TV and eating at the same times, that should be their choice. Even if it seems simple in scope, if that's what they want, you've got to grant what they want, because that's just what being a human is, having autonomy. And when you take that away from us, you are stripping us of our humanity. And it's odd they bring up the gulag. It's kind of like they're comparing us to leftists or Marxists, or at least using another dog whistle in place of that, which I considered odd. I also don't think that any self-advocates say that being autistic is perfect or a complete gift, just as being neurotypical is not perfect or a complete gift. We are disabled and we have no trouble acknowledging that, but we just want to be able to have control over our rights. That is mainly what it comes down to. And yes, we do want treatment for the things that cause difficulties in our lives, such as seizures and anxiety and depression. Those are things that plague many of us, and many of us die by suicide. The average life expectancy is usually up to 35, 36 years old, because so many of us die so young from the depression and anxiety and pressures that we're subjected to throughout our lives just because we're born differently. I never see any people like the NCSA or Autism Speaks addressing those things and trying to prevent that just figured it was something very important to bring up. In researching the Kennedy Krieger Institute, I also found that a lot of the focus was on genetics and causes of autism and increasing social skills and early intervention, but nowhere does it address like making society more accepting of autistic people. That should be the ultimate goal, all in all, not just for autistic people, but for all other minority groups in general. So I wonder why they never address that, or how we're discriminated, and how to stop that discrimination by attacking the root of it. Just a thought. And one more thing I want to say was that about the superpower thing, while Greta Thunberg may say that about her, I think most autistic people that I know, we wouldn't necessarily call it a superpower so much as it can help us in certain subjects that we're just really good at because of our sense of hyperfocus. But I don't think that makes us superior to anyone. If anything, we just want to be treated like everybody else, to be on an equal playing field with the neurotypical population, to be making the same decisions as they do. I think that's all it comes down to, really. I think all the talk about ABA will be a great segue into discussing eugenics and how that affects the autistic community, as that has certainly had an influence on ABA to a degree, I believe. So that will be the topic of my next video. And I'll be covering the eugenics movement in the 1920s, as well as propaganda films such as Sounding the Alarm. So stay tuned, and thank you for watching.